Welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap Student to Engineer, where STEM professionals provide advice to students. This video is going to cover the difference between interns and co-ops and the similarities. I've gotten a lot of questions, both from people who are looking at different schools and from people who are in school about the differences between these two and a little bit of confusion. Some schools say they require cooperative education experience while you're in school to graduate, and that's often seen as a bonus. A lot of schools don't require any work experience while you're in school, and so that may seem like a differentiator in the program, but let's talk about what those differences are and whether or not that is something that you want to do when you're looking at programs. So here, the subtitle here is what's the difference between an internship and a cooperative education experience. I spelled those out because we typically use the short terms for these, interns and co-ops, but those are the real long words that those shorter words represent. So in this video, we're going to start with similarities, go into differences, and then talk about key takeaways. What you're going to see is that the definitions of an intern and co-op are not hard and fast. There's a lot of typically, usually, most of the time, most often, those types of things with these definitions. So let's get right into it. So similarities. Both an intern and a co-op is a work experience while you are a student, while you're getting a degree, and you're working with an industry employer. You're working with someone that is related to either your degree or related to an industry that you want to go into. These are experiences that allow you to explore what kind of work you might want to do and what working in that field might be. This is not work experience that is completely unrelated, like say working in a fast food or being a lifeguard, those types of things that you could have done before you were getting your degree. And it is while you are getting your degree. Occasionally people will have an internship or a co-op after the summer after they get their degree. That is most often when they're continuing or planning on going to grad school after that. But typically it is while you're in your degree and you are working with something that's related to what you may do in the future. Along those lines, um, it's quite often that students who want to go into a specific industry, like let's say aerospace, there's a lot of people who are interested in aerospace, but may not be pursuing an aerospace degree. Maybe you're getting a mechanical or an electrical but you're still interested in the aerospace industry. So an intern or a co-op would be an opportunity for you to work in the aerospace industry and to demonstrate that you do have interest in that area, and also to find out if you really are interested. Okay, so next, these positions are typically full-time. And they are typically without employee benefits. You wouldn't go into an intern or a co-op expecting to get, full medical and dental and a lot of time off and those types of things. Um, Sometimes interns and co-ops get things like paid holidays, um, a little bit of paid time off during their time. Sometimes they'll get relocation benefits. Sometimes they'll get a stipend for their living expenses during the period of their work experience. So there are times when you'll get limited benefits, but this is definitely not a time where you're going to be a full-time employee getting everything that maybe a full-time employee would get. Okay, and both of them require applications and interviews. There are some discussions that I've seen where there's a misunderstanding that if you're in a co-op program, particularly a school that requires a co-op program, that you just get the job. All of these positions are going to require you to apply and interview. Whether that is going out and searching on your own or going to an employer that the university already has set up or already has a relationship with, um, is really dependent on the program. And but both of them require applications and interviews. You will be expected to have a resume. You will be expected to go talk to someone who's going to interview you and select you from the candidates. So we'll get into that differences between interns and co-ops related to this on the next slide. Okay, and they're not guaranteed. This goes back to schools that require some sort of work experience while you're in school. There are people who are in programs that require work experience, and they're looking at that as the hardest hurdle they have to overcome to get to graduation because they're having a hard time getting a job for whatever reason. You will not go into a program with a guarantee of a job. If you are looking at programs or you're currently in a program that requires some sort of work experience, ask a lot of questions about how students get jobs, how often students are struggling to get jobs, how many jobs are posted versus the number of students that are trying to get them. Those types of things is what you want to ask, because while it is very, very good to have work experience while you're in school, and I really encourage it, you can't go into something thinking that it's guaranteed because it's required. Okay, so pay. So they usually pay less than what you would be making after graduation, but more than your typical high school job. I mentioned fast food and lifeguarding. They should pay more than that, but you're going to be making less than a full-time salary. It used to be that interns and co-ops were sometimes not paid, and some schools provide data about the percent of their students who are working in jobs that are paid. It is really, really highly encouraged that employers pay interns and co-ops now. There's a equity issue with not paying, and it is really important that they do pay you because they need to be invested in you and invested in the position and invested in the program. So there are jobs out there that do not pay, but in general, you should be looking for jobs that pay, both so that you can pay your living expenses for the summer, but if you can and you're able to, you can save up some of that money to pay for part of your schooling, which we know is important because that's pretty expensive usually. But in general, it'll be paid less than a full-time position and more than you would at an average high school job. Most of the schools I've been seeing right now are saying that their interns and co-ops are making in the low 20s per hour, just as a reference point. Okay, so they can help you get a job after graduation, absolutely. When I go hire new grads or early career and you don't have, and that the applicant doesn't have any internship experience, I wonder why. If you're doing research, that's a good reason to not have internship experience, but if you've gone and worked a job that you could have done in high school um, for your entire college career, I just question why that is. So it is really important to get experience in the industry. Whether that's the industry you're going to apply to after school is another thing, but really getting a professional job where you're working in a similar type of situation, in an office, on a construction site, in a laboratory, something like that, where you demonstrate that you can work in a position that's related to what your education has been. Also, I'm going to provide a link to um, a video that I made that's about why you should intern. That video talks specifically about interns, but it is applicable to co-ops and interns. If you're interested in more benefits of getting work experience, it's a great resource. Okay, and then one of those, good reasons to get jobs is that it can provide exposure to industries, locations, types of work. This really is a big uh, point in that video that I've provided the link to here. You can get exposure to a lot of different things. You can decide if you want to move to a certain state that you're looking at. You can, you may think that you want to work outside, or you may think you want to work in an office. This gives you the opportunity to get just a little bit of a taste of working in those kind of environments that you maybe didn't get an exposure to before. All right, so let's get into the differences. The duration. So internships are typically a single term and outside of school schedule. The reason I put it this way is because they are typically during the summer, but there are schools that provide, like a January break or something like that. So typically an internship would be you apply for one duration, maybe that summer break, and then you're going to need to apply next time. So not really a commitment for long term, although sometimes internships can lead to a part-time job throughout the school year. Co-ops may take place during a normal school time. And what I mean by this is that co-ops sometimes are like 6-month jobs. And so what you would do is you would go to your co-op full-time work instead of going to school that semester. So it's a little bit like if you think about you'll be off campus for study abroad or something like that, where you're just not going to your regular school for a period of time. In this case, you would be working for that period of time. So sometimes it's like a summer and a fall semester, for example, you'd be working for that chunk of time. Some schools have programs where you go to school for a semester and then work for a semester, go to school for a semester, work for a semester, that type of alternating, um, so that you're not necessarily on campus. This is typical, and this is May, because a lot of programs are different now. So just look into the program and find out what they mean when they say co-op or internship program. Some people who are very social and want to make sure they've got, consistent friends and all of that are a little bit concerned about doing a co-op where it takes their time away from school, because you are away from your school environment during that time. That's something for you to consider, but also consider that schools that have a large co-op program are going to have a lot of people doing this. And so you might be on the same co-op schedule as your friends anyway, or you'll make friends that are on the same co-op schedule as you. So something to consider as you're looking at interns versus co-ops. Okay, so the work session, I mentioned this, internships are typically applied for each session, and co-ops may be prearranged. So what this means is that you might get a co-op with a company, and the company has a commitment for you to work with them 3 terms, 5 terms, whatever the school program is. Internships are not that way. An internship you apply for this summer, for example, it may be that the company really likes you and they want to keep you on and they ask you to come back before you leave. Or it may be that they give you a contingent offer for the following summer or something like that. But that's not really typical. Typically, you would have to apply for each session. So typically in the summer, but you'd have to apply over and over. Co-ops are sometimes that way, but they may be prearranged so that you're applying once and interviewing once for multiple work sessions. Okay, the school-employer relationships. Typically, again, we're using that word a lot. Internships are based on independent student applications, and it may be that your school has relationships with employers in that, they have Handshake or some other online tool where they have employers post their jobs and students apply. But co-ops are more often through school relationships. And what I mean by school relationships is that the the employer typically hires co-ops from the school. They may say, I have 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 positions that I want to fill with co-ops from this particular school because I know that program. We know that we like grads from there, students from there, and we understand how the co-op program works. That typically it's more often with co-ops. Internships are typically where the company just has, 50 openings, 100 openings, and they're usually not designated for a particular school. Usually they're just posted out there and whoever can apply. Now the employer may go and recruit at a school, they may be interested in students from a school, they may favor students from a school unofficially, but typically they're not going to set aside those openings for students from the school, um, which makes it a little bit different when you're applying. So if you've got co-op positions that is set aside with students from your school, and the ratio of jobs to students is right, you're going to have an easier time getting that job than you are just randomly applying. This particularly applies for if you're going to a small school that maybe doesn't have name recognition. Maybe you're going to a small school on the East Coast and you're applying to a job on the West Coast where they may or may not have heard of your school. That can give you a little bit of a disadvantage on internships, but the co-ops, if the school has a relationship with the employer, then you don't have to worry about that because they already know them. Okay, so timing. This is particularly about freshman year or after freshman year. Sometimes internships are hard to get after your freshman year. There are some companies that only hire after your sophomore year. And co-ops can be easier after your freshman year if the program is set up that way. And so you can have that opportunity to make more money, get that experience a little bit earlier if the co-op program is set up that way and you're there for it and ready to go with the right grades and everything. Internships, like I said, some employers have that rule, not after freshman year. Some are fine after freshman year. Even for the programs that or the employers that hire after freshman year, employers may favor those who have been in school longer, simply because they have more education under their belt, they're closer to being employable, and all of those kind of things. um, Either way, you can get jobs after freshman year. It just depends on individual circumstances and those kind of things. There are some schools that post the number of student or the percent of students who get jobs their freshman year. Um, and some of them just provide general, like what percent of their students have some sort of work experience by the time they graduate. If you are looking at that kind of data, absolutely look for schools that have like 80% of students have some sort of job experience before they graduate, because I've seen some really low numbers on schools that say, like 50% of their students have some sort of work experience after they graduate. That to me is pretty poor, and that says that maybe they're not helping their students get the jobs. Maybe they don't have those relationships with employers. It's hard to read into the data, but it is important to get that experience, and it is important to make that money, because you can make more money than you can doing another type of job. All right, so key takeaways. Any industry work experience is important. Anything you can get at any time, please get it if you can. The definitions are not universal. Seeing a school say they have an internship program or a co-op program where they require one or the other, absolutely ask questions and make sure you understand what it is that they're talking about. So ask questions, ask questions. Also, attending a school that requires a co-op doesn't mean anything is guaranteed. Please don't take it as a guarantee, because it is not, and it may become a problem, especially if the economy takes a dip and there are fewer jobs available. You may end up in a situation where you're having a hard time graduating just because you don't have that experience. So ask questions. If your school requires a co-op and you apply for an internship, make sure the internship meets the requirements of the school. I have hired students for an internship to fulfill co-op requirements at their school. And as a hiring manager, I had to fill out a few more forms, and there was a little bit more that had to do with the school, but I was willing to do that. I didn't have a problem with it. But the co-op that they were trying to fill the needs for had some minimum requirements that they wouldn't necessarily have met if we didn't work together to make sure that their experience met them. So make sure you look at that and that you are meeting the requirements. All right, so that's it for today. Thanks for listening to the end. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends and family who are in the similar situations, and we will see you next time.